What if the most unbelievable stories were never written at all? What if no one exaggerated, no one joked, and no one tried to be clever, yet the outcome still felt impossible to accept? Have you ever noticed how some real events sound fake, not because they're dramatic, but because every step technically followed logic? At what point does procedure become momentum and confidence replace thinking? And how often does reality drift so far from common sense that fiction wouldn't dare copy it? Stay with us, because these stories weren't imagined. They were documented, and logic quietly left before anyone noticed. Today we're opening the file on 45 real events that were too dumb to be made up. Not because the people involved were unintelligent, careless, or malicious, but because the situations followed logic just long enough to become absurd. These are moments where every step felt reasonable at the time. Every rule was technically followed, and no single decision looked catastrophic on its own. The problem wasn't intent, it was momentum. When confidence, procedure, and timing aligned without pause, reality quietly drifted into territory fiction would reject for being unrealistic. Fasten your seatbelts, because in these cases, nothing illegal happened, no villain appeared, and yet logic still failed spectacularly. When authority followed procedure too perfectly. 1. The police who stole their own bait car. In an effort to reduce auto theft, police deployed a bait car equipped with GPS tracking and remote shutdown. Officers later responded to a suspicious vehicle report and unknowingly seized the very bait car they had planted. The system worked flawlessly. Tracking, response, and recovery all executed as designed. The only failure was recognition, which no procedure accounted for. 2. The emergency drill that triggered an emergency response. A city scheduled a full-scale emergency drill involving simulated threats and actors. Nearby agencies not fully briefed treated the exercise as a real incident and mobilized resources. Sirens, evacuations, and command centers activated in perfect compliance with protocol. Preparation became indistinguishable from crisis because realism succeeded too well. 3. The airport that announced its own security breach. During a routine systems test, an airport broadcast an internal security alert over public channels. Passengers and staff responded appropriately by panicking and evacuating. Every response matched training guidelines. The only mistake was assuming alarms know when they're supposed to be silent. 4. The city that ticketed its own vehicles. Municipal parking enforcement issued fines to city-owned vehicles parked during official maintenance operations. The enforcement system recognized violations without recognizing ownership. Appeals were filed, reviewed, and denied by the same city departments. Efficiency worked perfectly, just not intelligently. 5. The fire alarm that shut down firefighters. A modern building's fire suppression system automatically sealed doors during an alarm. When firefighters arrived, the system locked them out while following safety programming exactly. Manual overrides required authorization delayed by the same emergency. The building protected itself flawlessly from help. If these situations feel less like mistakes and more like inevitabilities, that's because they were. Every system did what it was told. No one broke rules. And yet, the outcome still collapsed under their own logic. Next, we're moving from authority to engineering, where plans worked perfectly until reality showed up. When engineering trusted the blueprint too much. 6. The bridge that led nowhere. A regional authority approved and constructed a full roadway bridge intended to connect two growing areas. Construction followed plans precisely, budgets were met, and inspections passed without issue. Only after completion did it become clear that the connecting roads on either side had never been funded or approved. The bridge stood, perfect, functional, and completely unusable. 7. The building with doors that couldn't open together. An office complex installed energy-efficient automatic doors on both sides of a main corridor. Each door system worked correctly, just not at the same time. When one opened, the other locked to conserve airflow, trapping people in a procedural stalemate. Nothing malfunctioned, The system simply disagreed politely. 8. The software update that shut down the factory. A factory implemented a safety-focused software update to prevent equipment misuse. The update correctly flagged normal operations as potential violations and halted production. Engineers followed protocol and refused to override the system without approval. Safety succeeded so completely that productivity was temporarily outlawed. 9. The elevator that obeyed weight limits too literally. A newly installed elevator enforced weight limits with absolute precision. When the threshold was exceeded by even a negligible amount, it refused to move. Passengers were required to exit one by one until compliance was achieved. Physics wasn't the problem, interpretation was. 10. The parking garage that trapped its own customers. A smart parking garage used sensors to control entry and exit for efficiency. When a temporary network outage occurred, exits defaulted to secure mode. Cars entered normally, but couldn't leave without system confirmation. The garage protected itself from everyone. At this point, the pattern is clear. Nothing broke. Everything worked. The absurdity emerged not from error, but from obedience. And next, the focus shifts inward, to moments when human confidence quietly replaced caution and reality responded accordingly. When confidence replaced caution. 11. The man who tested the safety barrier himself. At a construction site, a newly installed safety barrier was praised for its durability and reliability. A supervisor decided to personally test its strength rather than wait for formal certification. The barrier performed exactly as designed, until the unexpected angle of impact bypassed its protection entirely. The test proved the barrier worked, just not for confidence. 12. The experienced operator who skipped the manual. A seasoned machine operator bypassed updated safety instructions, trusting years of experience instead. The equipment had been modified slightly, though the change looked insignificant. That minor difference caused a chain reaction no one anticipated. Experience didn't fail. The assumption that nothing had changed did. 13. The shortcut that became the longest route. A team rerouted traffic temporarily to speed up construction access. The shortcut seemed obvious, logical, and time-saving. Within hours, congestion spread through areas never designed for volume. Efficiency collapsed under its own cleverness. 14. The public demonstration that backfired immediately. An official demonstration was organized to showcase the safety of a new product. Everything worked perfectly during rehearsals. The live demonstration introduced variables no one controlled for. Confidence turned into documentation. 15. The "I've done this before" moment. An operation was approved based largely on prior success under similar conditions. Subtle differences were acknowledged, but dismissed as negligible. Those differences proved decisive. Familiarity didn't cause failure. Overconfidence did. At this stage, the absurdity isn't procedural, it's personal. No rules were broken, no warnings ignored deliberately. Confidence simply filled the gaps where caution should have lived. And next we move into the quietest form of chaos, bureaucracy following itself into a corner. When bureaucracy followed itself into a corner. 16. The form that required approval from itself. A government office introduced a new approval form designed to streamline internal requests. Submitting the form required prior authorization from the same department responsible for reviewing it. Staff followed the process precisely, creating a loop no one had permission to break. The system didn't reject the request, it waited for itself. 17. The permit that expired before it could be used. A construction project received conditional approval contingent on multiple follow-up inspections. Scheduling delays pushed the final inspection beyond the permit's expiration date. The project was fully compliant but legally unauthorized to proceed. Time, not safety, became the violation. 18. The help desk that couldn't accept help requests. An organization centralized all support requests into a digital ticketing system. When the system malfunctioned, employees were instructed to report issues through it. No alternative channel existed because redundancy had been optimized away. Support failed because efficiency succeeded. 19. The policy that canceled its own exception. A rule was introduced allowing rare exceptions under strict conditions. Another policy later redefined those conditions so narrowly that no case qualified. Staff applied both rules exactly as written. Flexibility was legislated out of existence. 20. The office closed for operational review. An agency shut down public-facing services to evaluate internal performance issues. Citizens were instructed to access services online or by phone. Both systems were routed to the same closed office. The review concluded operations were temporarily unavailable by design. Here, no individual made a bad decision. Every step followed written rules. The absurdity emerged because systems don't recognize when they've trapped themselves. And next, the modern layer appears, where speed, technology, and visibility combine to produce outcomes no one could slow down. When modern systems escalated instantly. 21. The automated message that announced the wrong disaster. A government alert system was designed to push emergency messages instantly to the public. During a routine internal test, a real alert template was selected instead of the test version. Phones across the region delivered urgent warnings within seconds. Speed worked perfectly. Discernment never entered the process. 22. The PR apology that created the crisis. A company prepared a proactive apology statement for a hypothetical future issue. The statement was accidentally published before any problem existed. Public attention turned speculation into reality within hours. The apology didn't fix a crisis, it manufactured one. 23. The algorithm that flagged reality as suspicious. An automated monitoring system was trained to detect unusual behavior patterns. When real-world conditions shifted, normal activity exceeded the system's thresholds. Operations were halted automatically while staff investigated anomalies. The algorithm didn't misread data, it misread context. 24. The live stream that documented its own mistake. A public event was live streamed to demonstrate transparency and competence. An unexpected error occurred mid-event. Instead of being quietly resolved, it was recorded, shared, and replayed endlessly. Visibility transformed a minor mistake into a permanent record. 25. The update that rolled back trust overnight. A digital platform released a routine update intended to improve user experience. The change altered behavior users relied on without warning. Confusion spread faster than explanations could follow. The system didn't fail technically, it failed socially. At this point, the absurdity accelerates. Decisions happen faster than reflection, and outcomes spread before anyone can intervene. But the final layer is the quietest of all, when timing, coincidence, and momentum align without any clear trigger. That's where we're going next. When timing did all the damage. 26. The announcement that came 5 minutes too early. An organization prepared a public announcement meant to follow a private internal decision. Due to a scheduling error, the announcement was released before stakeholders had been informed. Confusion escalated as people learned outcomes before context. Nothing in the message was wrong. The timing rewrote its meaning. 27. The coincidence that looked like sabotage. 2 unrelated departments scheduled major system changes for the same day. Individually, each change was manageable and approved. Together, they triggered failures that looked intentional from the outside. Chance aligned decisions into a narrative no one authored. 28. The backup plan that activated too soon. A safety protocol was designed to trigger only after multiple confirmation steps. One signal arrived early, while others lagged behind. The system escalated automatically, locking in a response before verification completed. Caution fired before certainty arrived. 29. The delay that turned clarity into confusion. A clarification message was drafted immediately after an initial announcement caused concern. Approval cycles slowed its release just long enough for speculation to spread. By the time clarification arrived, the story had solidified without it. Silence became interpreted as confirmation. 30. The event that became absurd only in retrospect. At the moment it unfolded, every decision seemed reasonable and proportional. Only when reviewed as a complete sequence did the absurdity appear. No single step caused failure. Timing stitched them together into a result no one intended. Here, there were no bad systems and no overconfidence, just moments aligning without coordination. Absurdity didn't need error, it only needed sequence. And next, we move into the final escalation, where multiple small, reasonable choices collide at once. When small decisions collided all at once. 31. The backup system that backed up the wrong thing. A company installed a redundant backup system to protect against data loss. When a minor configuration error occurred, the backup mirrored the mistake perfectly across all systems. Recovery protocols worked exactly as designed, restoring the error repeatedly. Redundancy preserved the problem instead of the solution. 32. The safety review that approved the hazard. A multi-layer safety review process required each department to sign off independently. Every department approved their specific area, assuming others had covered the rest. No single reviewer saw the full picture. Safety existed in fragments, never assembled. 33. The delay caused by too many approvals. An urgent fix required authorization from several departments to ensure accountability. Each approval was granted quickly, but sequentially rather than simultaneously. The solution arrived after the situation resolved itself the hard way. Oversight didn't prevent failure, it arrived too late to matter. 34. The temporary measure that became permanent policy. A short-term workaround was introduced during an unexpected disruption. The measure worked well enough to avoid immediate consequences. Over time, it was normalized and never revisited. The exception quietly became the rule. 35. The review that looked only forward. After a complex incident, an organization conducted a forward-looking review focused on prevention. The review avoided examining the original decision chain to maintain morale. Lessons were drawn without context. The system improved without understanding itself. By now, absurdity no longer feels surprising. It feels inevitable. Not because anyone was careless, but because enough small decisions accumulated without pause. And in the final stretch, the events don't get louder, they get quieter. When nothing triggered alarm bells. 36. The system that failed because it looked normal. A monitoring system was designed to flag unusual behavior outside expected ranges. As conditions slowly shifted, abnormal behavior gradually became the new baseline. Alerts never triggered because the change was incremental. The system didn't miss the failure. It redefined it as normal. 37. The meeting where everyone assumed someone else spoke up. A critical decision was reviewed by multiple stakeholders in a single meeting. No objections were raised, not because agreement existed, but because silence felt procedural. Each participant assumed hesitation would be voiced by someone else. Consensus emerged accidentally. 38. The checklist that replaced judgment. A detailed checklist was introduced to eliminate human error. Staff focused on completing steps rather than evaluating outcomes. Every box was checked successfully. The result failed because understanding was never on the list. 39. The warning that arrived without authority. An early concern was documented but labeled as informational rather than urgent. Because no action was formally required, the warning circulated without ownership. It was read, acknowledged, and ignored simultaneously. The message wasn't wrong, it was powerless. 40. The failure that looked like success. Metrics performance indicators showed improvement across all tracked categories. Unmeasured side effects accumulated quietly outside the dashboard. Leadership celebrated progress until the system stalled unexpectedly. What wasn't counted became decisive. At this stage, the events no longer hinge on mistakes or bad calls. They hinge on absence of friction, interruption, or challenge. And now, in the final 5, everything converges into outcomes that feel inevitable only after they happen. When everything made sense until it didn't. 40 only, the decision that was technically correct every step of the way. A complex operation unfolded through multiple approvals, reviews, and confirmations, each one technically valid. At no point did any individual step violate policy, safety rules, or best practices. Only when the full sequence was reviewed did the outcome appear absurd. Correct decisions stacked perfectly into an incorrect result. 42. The problem no one was authorized to stop. As an issue escalated, several people recognized the risk forming in real time. However, each role was limited to observation or reporting, not intervention. The system required escalation, but escalation required conditions that hadn't officially been met yet. Everyone saw it coming. No one was allowed to touch it. 43. The fix that locked the outcome in place. A mid-process adjustment was introduced to stabilize a developing issue. The fix reduced flexibility and removed remaining exit options. What felt like control actually finalized the trajectory. Intervention didn't change direction, it committed to it. 44. The after-action review that couldn't find a mistake. Following the event, an extensive review analyzed logs, procedures, and decision points. No violations, misconduct, or negligence were identified. The incident was classified as an unfortunate but compliant outcome. The system cleared itself completely. 45. The event that could only be called absurd in hindsight. While it unfolded, the situation felt manageable, logical, and proportional. Only after replaying the entire chain did the absurdity become undeniable. Nothing dramatic caused it, momentum did. Reality didn't break logic, it followed it too far. When logic didn't break, it just went too far. Looking back at all 45 events together, a clear pattern emerges, and it isn't stupidity. None of these situations happened because someone wanted chaos, ignored rules, or acted maliciously. In fact, most of them unfolded because people did exactly what they were supposed to do. Procedures were followed, systems behaved as designed, decisions were reasonable in isolation. The absurdity only appears when you zoom out. Again and again, small logical steps stacked without interruption. Confidence replaced caution. Speed outran reflection. Rules protected processes instead of outcomes. And once momentum built, no single person or system had the authority or the signal to stop it. What looked sensible moment by moment became indefensible only in hindsight. What makes these events unsettling isn't how loud they are, but how quiet they begin. No alarms, no villains, just normal operations drifting into outcomes fiction would reject for being unrealistic. Reality didn't exaggerate, it complied. These stories aren't warnings about intelligence, they're reminders about systems, about how modern life is designed to move forward, not to pause. About how responsibility can dissolve when it's distributed too evenly, and about how easily logic can escape common sense when no one is tasked with asking the final question: does this still make sense as a whole? In the end, these events aren't funny because they're dumb. They're funny because they're familiar, because anyone who has worked inside a system has seen moments where everything was correct and still completely wrong. And that's the most uncomfortable truth of all. Reality doesn't need to be made up. It just needs enough momentum. Reality didn't break the rules. It followed them. What makes these 45 events uncomfortable isn't how ridiculous they sound. It's how familiar they feel. None of them required a villain. None depended on someone being reckless, ignorant, or malicious. In fact, many of them unfolded precisely because people acted responsibly, followed procedures, respected authority, and trusted systems to behave as expected. That's the part fiction struggles with. Stories usually need intention. Reality doesn't. These events didn't spiral because someone chose chaos. They escalated because momentum replaced reflection, because no single step felt wrong enough to stop, because responsibility was distributed so evenly that no one owned the outcome, and because systems are excellent at continuing, but terrible at asking whether they should. What these cases reveal isn't human stupidity, it's a structural blind spot. Modern systems are designed to optimize speed, compliance, and efficiency. They move forward by default. Pausing requires permission. Questioning requires authority. And stopping often requires conditions that only appear after it's too late. That's why so many of these events feel inevitable in hindsight. Every decision made sense locally. Every rule was followed correctly. The absurdity only becomes visible when the entire chain is viewed at once. Logic didn't fail, it simply operated without a ceiling. And that's the quiet danger. Not stupidity, but confidence without interruption. Not mistakes, but alignment. When procedure outruns judgment and systems protect themselves better than outcomes, reality can drift into places no one intended and everyone technically approved. These stories don't ask us to be smarter. They ask us to be slower. To recognize that common sense doesn't live in manuals, dashboards, or checklists. It lives in the space between steps. The moment where someone notices that everything is working, but nothing feels right. Because the most absurd real events don't happen when rules are broken. They happen when rules are followed perfectly. This has been the Absurdist Files, where reality doesn't need exaggeration, where logic isn't the villain, and where the most unbelievable stories are the ones that required no